The same argument applies exactly to preventive interventions which are non-pharmaceutically based, delivered within the UK Health Service. So what accounts for the skew in investment? I think there's three main factors. Biotech and pharma can recover R&D costs through patent protection and consequent price markups, 3 to 4 times the cost of production. Much complementary and alternative medicine can't. The NHS programme is now geared as much towards economic benefits to UK PLC as towards health benefits, and the large infrastructure spend for BP trials represents an economically justified subsidy to the biopharmaceutical sector. But the key issue at the end of the day is that biopharmaceutical research fits with an overarching scientific materialist paradigm where some complementary and alternative systems do not. For example, acupuncture, homeopathy, osteopathy, hence the Dawkins-esque attack on them as magical and fantasy. So I think we have an obligation empirically to test safety and effectiveness of any preventive or treatment intervention in health. And this is the case whether the intervention is labelled orthodox, traditional, complementary, alternative, comprises pill, manipulation, needling, or promoting a change in health-related behaviour. I also think that anyone offering such interventions is under an obligation not to make claims for safety or effectiveness where they've no evidence to support it. However, we know that in many of the most deprived societies, almost 50% of people use some kind of complementary alternative treatment in any year. And according to the World Health Organization, in some Asian and African countries, 80% of the population rely on traditional medicine for their primary care. So there's a lot of it about. We also know that the properties and clinical values of, for example, many plant-based preparations have been known for many years, certainly long before the advent of RCTs or even the development of modern chemistry. And Chinese medicine probably pioneered an understanding of exercise interventions and an awareness of environmental dietary influences on health, which are even now only now being accepted in the West. And I can remember sitting in a lecture with Richard Doll at the School of Hygiene in 1987, where he said, my friends asked me whether I believe that exercise is important in preventing coronary heart disease. And my only comment is that the exact line was, I couldn't possibly say, but I know I spent a long time walking in the funeral cortèges of my sports-playing friends. So, a little anecdote. Okay, conducting randomised double-blind controlled trials of each complementary and alternative treatment for each condition is not an economic option at present. As we've said, costs to bring a new pharmaceutical drug to market are somewhere in the region of 500 million, and there's no way in many cases where that can be recovered. In many cases, however, complementary and alternative treatments are used within the constructs of physiology and pathogenesis which are quite different from the material and biochemical systems which we now consider orthodox. So was medicine prior to the last 2 or 3 centuries wholly unsuccessful? Or if there were successes, to what extent were these based on empirical experiment? And to what extent were they based on rational therapeutics, grounded in observation of effects on the physiological system as then constructed? The role of science, as I see it, is to develop theories which make predictions about phenomena which can then be tested, and then to set about testing them. The physico and pathological theories used by different systems within complementary and alternative medicine family make predictions which in many cases are eminently testable. Therefore, we can and should develop scientific experiments which test these. Given the range of treatments and conditions for which they're used, perhaps it might be more cost-effective as a start to carry out experiments which test the predictive value of the physiological, pathological and diagnostic systems used by CAT, including things such as the stability of diagnosis between observers and practitioners, prediction of therapeutic benefit from observed physiological effects. A few carefully designed experiments would be affordable. If they generated positive evidence that these theories used by complementary and alternative medicine made successful predictions about observable phenomena, then strong arguments could be made in support of their utility and leading to greater public investments in research programs into the effectiveness of complementary alternative medicine. In an era of evidence-based medicine, accumulating evidence might be expected to translate into growing public investment in CAM research. So let's not set about a program of a whole load of trials for individual treatments for individual conditions, but actually let's think about some forensic experiments which actually test the predictive value of the systems which are represented by the family of complementary and alternative medicine. So that's my argument. Difficult to then switch into a chairing role. Questions? Observations? You've silenced them all. Anne.
Sticking my neck out, Adrian. Sorry. You're going to have to answer proposing that, if I can follow the ins and outs of what you said. You're going to have to be able to answer those who say, but how are you going to test these CAM? How are you, if you can't use RCTs a lot of the time. I know you said you're not testing the individual interventions, you're trying to do it as a whole, but I wondered if you could elaborate on how you would answer them to say, but you can't run a proper RCT.
Well, you can run a proper RCT. Can I give you one example? There was a study carried out by the National Institute of Health in the US as part of in a program driven by wanting to do more about women's health in developing countries. And in fact, what they did a study comparing the standard WHO recommended drug to prevent postpartum hemorrhage, which is a major cause of perinatal death in women, and they compared it to what they were using within the Tibetan medical system. And they found indeed that there was an increased effectiveness of what was recommended, but it was pretty small. And the drug, the herbal preparation, which had been used for many years by the traditional practitioners, was effective. Now, discussions with people who are operating within traditional, for example, medical systems, and Tibetan is one of them, you discover that they've got large amounts of antibiotics floating around. Yeah? Sorry, carry on. Anne.
The problem is that the example you've used is actually one type of drug or one type of, you've got an equivalent to a drug. It's when people, the needles or the talking therapy, which are much more difficult to, and they're not amenable to RCTs, and it's those kinds of alternative, complementary CAMs, I don't know how you put it, which people will argue you can't find an acceptable equivalent to an RCT.
Well, that I accept that point, Anne, but the point that I was trying to make was illustrative, and it's not terribly well worked through, but there's a lot of antibiotics floating around, and what people do is they observe the physiological effects of those antibiotics within the context of their own constructs of physiology and pathogenesis, and then they use those drugs within the context of their own therapeutic system based upon their observations of the therapeutic effects. Now, it seems to me that we're a system, and we have to acknowledge that a lot of these systems do have different notions of physiology and pathogenesis, which appear to be somewhat magical. If you could show that a system could predict the use of, for example, a therapeutic use of a compound which had been developed within a Western biopharmaceutical framework, which could actually be demonstrated in a trial to have efficacy, then you would have actually said something about the integrity of the physiological and the pathogenetic system which people are actually using. So that's partly what I'm getting at, because within orthodox medicine we have the whole weight of physics, of chemistry, of science, of the whole sort of edifice of post-Enlightenment science behind the therapeutic interventions.